Seguimos en CTIA Wireless 2011, es el evento que se celebra en Orlando, Florida, y seguimos con invitados como hicimos hace poquito en el Mobile World Congress, mismo formato, y en estos momentos contamos con la presencia de Callum Byers, que es el General Manager Software Products de una empresa que se llama Aircom. Welcome to Torre Semana.
Thank you.
And apologies for my call.
No problem.
So tell us what the company does, what are you guys showing here, and what is your message to the industry?
Okay. So Aircom International is basically in the business of optimizing operators' networks. Now we do it in two ways. We have a consulting business and we have a software business which provides tools for operators or for vendors to optimize the networks.
Okay. Now, in terms of optimization, operators now have a bunch of technologies, especially here in the US, but soon elsewhere. They have GSM, they have WCDMA, they have upgraded to HSDPA+, and they are coming with LTE. How do you optimize this salad?
So several things you have to do. I think that what we're seeing is that the majority of the new deployments in 4G, and the same thing happened in 3G, were rolled out on top of existing networks.
Okay.
So the key problem for the operator is
Which is
to
bad or good?
understand. Well, it's inevitable.
Okay.
It's inevitable. Yeah? You're often, very rarely, you're starting completely from scratch. Normally you have something there. So the key problem for the operator is to understand the impact of adding this additional capacity, these new technologies on the network, because in many cases, the user using the network will start on 4G, he may move to 3G, he may move to 2G and move back. So each of these layers is interconnected.
Okay, when we talk about optimization, because our operators, what they complain is we don't have a spectrum, we have a lot of traffic of data growing, we probably cannot accommodate all this traffic data with what we have. Either we need more spectrum, either we need more technologies. So optimization, what's the role of optimization in terms of how much can operators alleviate if they properly optimize their network? What's the benefit?
So we really see that in three different ways. So firstly, it's planning. So how do you plan properly, and how do you plan taking into account the reality of what's on the ground? So it's not just a theoretical, it's planning using data from your own network. So that's the first step, to get the right plan. The second is to be able to monitor the network when it's out there, to understand the performance, to understand what is the user experiencing from your network. And then the third is to be able to reconfigure that network to rapidly redeploy new base stations and to make sure that the network can flex with the changes in the user demand. And what we do is we offer tools that play in each of these areas and consultancy services to work with the operators to deploy these tools or to better understand how they can optimize their network.
Okay, let me ask you this. This is a very silly question. I'm going to ask you.
No such thing as a silly question.
Yes. Well,
maybe silly answers. Yeah.
Okay, well, wait until I give the question and then you decide. One will figure that if an operator like, let's say one of Latin America, América Móvil, which is a large operator, hires Ericsson or Nokia Siemens Networks or Alcatel-Lucent to deploy a new technology, we all assume that they're going to do it in the right way. Is that so?
I think it depends on what you mean by the right way. Right?
Optimized.
So quite clearly,
properly optimized.
Well, they will optimize that network based on the information they have at that time. But I guess the key thing is that the operator, they may run a new program with a new marketing campaign, the usage goes up, then the network has to change dynamically with that. I think the other thing is that most operators don't have one vendor. They have two vendors or three vendors. Each vendor is slightly different in terms of how they set up their equipment, how they work together. So one of the benefits we bring is we can compare, if you like, between the different networks. We work closely with all the different vendors, and because we're independent, then we have no particular axe to grind. So we're able to come and say, here's how you can optimize, because you're working in a situation where you have more than one vendor in the network.
Okay, then let me ask you another silly question. Would be the optimization process for what you're saying? It's something that keeps going all the time. You cannot stop thinking that your network is optimized in a given point in time, because obviously you're going to be adding, as you said, new services, devices, whatever. So how does the optimization tools work? Is there, because we are hearing a lot about the real-time thing on many aspects of the network. Does the optimization is starting to take into consideration real-time information so we can actually adapt quicker to the changes in your network to optimize it?
It's never going to be completely real time. I mean, so for example, when we're looking at performance statistics on the KPIs and the counters, typically we take a read every 15 minutes. So
every 15 minutes?
So every 15 minutes. And that's pretty good because that still gives you a lot of data and it allows you to draw trends and to say where it's going. Now, if you're looking to the next level and where people are going with Sun is to be able to reconfigure the network to reflect movements and traffic patterns, that timing will need to get shorter. But the other side of that is that you may get to a situation where you reconfigure the network such that in the evenings there's more capacity in here, in the mornings there's more capacity there, in which case the real-time issue is less because you can plan for some of that.
Okay, when you mentioned the self-organizing networks, and that's kind of a new technology that it seems to impact the network quite significantly in terms of what you're saying, not just optimization, but optimization, like depending on what's happening on the network. I've heard some people say that self-organizing networks is kind of a fantasy land, or it sits on the fantasy land. I don't know, what is your take from what you've been seeing on the market, if it's something...
No, it's definitely not a fantasy. The way we'd see it, it's a direction. Right? It's a direction, it means a lot of different things, and within self-organizing network, I mean, we see really three things. We see self-configuring networks, and that's becoming almost standard with LTE. When you put in a base station, it configures itself. That's the first step.
Okay. So that's happening now already?
That's beginning to happen now, and it's becoming, there are so many devices out there, there are so many, when you move to things like femtocells, it's almost impossible for you to do the configuration. So that self-configuration is the first step. The second step is where you get to perhaps self-healing.
Self-healing.
So therefore something's gone wrong, the network realizes it and it compensates because you've got sufficient coverage, capacity, so if that sector goes down, I'll cover it from other sectors or I'll change the neighbor relations or whatever. And the third is really when you get to self-optimization, where you're constantly tuning, retuning yourself to that. Now we're a long way from actually getting to that point, but we're building towards it in steps. So I think self-organizing is a direction. It's a kind of all-encompassing, but it is absolutely real.
Well, you mentioned the things that sound so good for the operators, and now I understand why some people say it sits on the fantasy land, because it really sounds like promising for.
It's promising. There's huge potential benefits. I think a lot of the reality comes to issues like you said about real time. I mean, how can we really make these things happen that quickly? I think there's an ongoing debate around standards, because each of the vendors has got their own ideas as to how do I optimize my particular bit of equipment, and then how do I open up that equipment to allow other people to see what's going so they can do it. So there's a lot of kind of moving around at the moment, but it's a very exciting time. Okay,
from the business model, and just to make clear for the operators that might be looking at this video from Latin America, would an operator hire IRCOM independently, or you guys come to the hand of the manufacturers that are providing the infrastructure? You said you were independent, but I'm not sure if that means...
It depends. Most of our business is directly with the operators.
Okay.
Well, so we provide the tools, we provide the services, whatever. Now, in some cases, the operator has bought their network from the vendor, and they've maybe even outsourced the network to the vendor, in which case we would also provide services. So we provide services to vendors, we provide tools to vendors. We can actually do either. At the end of the day, the ultimate customer is the operator, but in some cases it's direct, in some cases it's via or with the vendor.
What about that trend that we're seeing of some operators giving away some of the managing of their network to their vendor provider, like Ericsson? We've seen major announcements here in the US. Would that mean that at some point perhaps your clients are going to be...
Yes, we're seeing that, and that's my point. We're seeing that we actually do a lot of business with the vendors as well, either directly as part of that, or in some cases, we actually work with the operators to provide an independent view of what are they getting from that outsourcing. Okay. So there's an SLA in place, how do you verify that SLA, all these sort of things.
Okay. Would you say that that trend that we're seeing here in the US of giving away some of the managing, it's a smart move for operators? Do you think that, for example, Latin Americans that I know, they are very close-minded in that regard, in giving away some of the management? Do you think that's smart?
I think it's interesting. When you go around the world, you see it varies very much by country, by region, by culture, or whatever. At the end of the day, the operator needs to focus on the customer. How do they understand the customer? How do they provide the right marketing, and so on? So the technical details of managing the network, if they can get the quality of service they require, maybe that's not their core competence.
Okay.
So depending on the operator, depending on their background, if somebody else can do that to their level, they can then focus on the marketing, they can then focus on making a difference for their end users, as long as they don't get too removed from the end user, in which case it's very difficult for them to sustain that advantage.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Okay.
stopping by. We'll let you go to sit here, to browse around. And thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next time in Latin America.
I'll definitely do that. Thank you very much.